What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Age of Quarantine. I'm David Castillo from Saint Vitus Bar. Nice to see everybody today, sort of, through the phone. We have a very, very, very amazing guest today. We have Jamie Stewart, Xiu Xiu. Man, so much to say. Pretty much a living legend, in my opinion. Really bridging the gap between everything from post-punk to avant-garde-ish noise music, lots of different sort of disparate genres. I really believe this is one of a kind artist. I'm really excited to get in and around his mind. It's really cool. I've never been able to meet this person before, and also, unfortunately, we had a show on the books that is going to be rescheduled at St. Vitus at a certain point. So without further ado, here's Jamie. Let's get to seeing what's up with Xiu Xiu. Cheers. Wonderful week so far. I'm going to grab myself a drink and wait for this to connect and have a Jamie, hello.
Hey man, how are you?
I'm doing good. Just hanging out here in New Jersey. Welcome to the Age of Quarantine. It's a thrill to have you.
Thanks. You said that was a very nice introduction. That was very generous. Thanks.
It's generous, but true, because what I think is the right thing.
Good.
as
I agree with you.
For these two squares for this show, that's actually the truth. So
thank you.
Thanks for joining us. We had a Xiu Xiu show on the books for
St. in March, right?
Yeah, I think it was going to be the first one that we ever did, and I was really looking forward to it. Actually,
yeah, me too.
My coworker Tyler booked it, and I was just like, "Man, you got Xiu Xiu." I was super pumped, and then of course the world fell apart. So hey, at least we have this for now. But
Thanks.
You're coming back. I'm
indeed.
You that you're coming back.
No doubt.
So, Jamie, here on the Age of Quarantine, we pretty much just, I try and chart the musical journey of people. And you've had kind of a storied, long discography and career. So we'll do the best.
Well, long anyway.
Yeah, long. I was scrolling through and I was like, wow, okay, we got this, we got this, we got this. There are things that I didn't even know about, which is what's cool about doing this show and really taking the deeper dives and stuff. So, talk to me. Let's start right at your earliest point. Were you born and raised in San Jose, or is that where the project is from?
No, I was born in Los Angeles, and I grew up in Los Angeles. But the band, and I moved back maybe 8 or 9 years ago. But the band started in San Jose.
Got it. Okay, cool. So now that we've located that, when was your earliest sort of memories of kind of being attracted to music as a kid? We all kind of buzz around music in a certain way, and in that sort of very natural state. When did you start thinking, hey, I'm attracted to this?
It was funny. It was a very fundamental but long arc. My dad and uncle were both very, very successful musicians. So it was always around the house when I was a kid. And my dad would take me to the studio and I would like fall asleep under the mixing desk or whatever. And he would tell me not to ever touch the razor blades that they use for editing tape.
Oh, yeah.
But he was a workaholic and had some drug problems. So he was pretty checked out. So it wasn't like music was around, but it wasn't like we sat down and played guitar together or anything like that. And when I was an adult, we did, but as a kid, never really. But he knew that I was interested in it. So periodically, I'd come home and, there would be like a Otis Redding tape or a Talking Heads tape on my bed or something, or, on more exciting days, like I came home one day and there was a 4-track just on my bed with no manual, no explanation. It was just sort of like, okay, here you go, buddy, figure it out. Good luck. I got other shit to do.
I love that.
And, everybody on earth is, attracted to music in one way or another. But I think because I knew that that's what he was doing, and I could, sort of from a distance, see that that's what was going on, I started trying to pursue it also. Where there were guitars and stuff like that around the house. So I tried doing. And when I was in junior high, I had my first band, which was heavily influenced by Weird Al Yankovic. It was called the Lime Green Leisure Suits. We just wrote kind of mean joke songs about all the other kids in the class. and then we would sell the tapes to the kids in the class. And then everybody obviously hated us, so we were making more fun of them and then making them pay for it.
There's plenty of bands who probably have made a good career doing just that. So
yeah,
I think you guys are onto something kind of early, right? Hey, why not? But I find that really interesting that you were just in and around music because of your family.
Yeah.
But then, it was never really explained to you. That's kind of cool. It's
yeah,
like,
that it wasn't explained to me is a good way to put it, yeah.
Yeah, like we dropped the keys off. There's the car, but like we're not going to teach you how to drive.
That's kind of how it was until I was. I played in a couple bands before I was in Xiu Xiu, and my dad actually played in one of those bands. I think he was trying to. He had a kind of brief period of kind of having his act together mentally and emotionally, and he was like, "Oh man, I really fucking blew it with your childhood. I know that you want to become serious about music. Maybe this is something we could do together."
Mm-hmm.
So he, and then unfortunately his brain fell apart again. He got back into drugs. But so there was a couple of years where we were very, very close and, playing together a lot when I was maybe 20 or something.
Wow.
And then he kind of showed me how to use Pro Tools and things like that. So I had this kind of like very feral childhood of just screwing around and trying to figure stuff out, and then it was like, okay, I have this brief window of clarity. I have to pass it along to my son immediately before I go nuts again. And then he kind of did it, and then went nuts again. I wouldn't be anywhere without those couple of years. He showed me the kind of the basics of recording and taught me a lot about arranging and kind of helped me put a band together.
Wow.
It was weird. Because it was, because he was a weird guy and I'm a weird guy, and it's weird playing in a band with your dad, even if he's cool, and like a, rock and roll dude. I'm very thankful for that weird period. Yeah, being on stage with your dad is weird.
Yeah, that's really where I really think of it, right? It's like.
But he's a motherfucker. He was a great player, so he was fantastic. So he
what
great.
instrument did he play?
He was a session guitar player, but in this band he played bass.
Got it. Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. So for you, when you were kind of getting in and around playing, so, you said you had your, kind of the teen, middle school punk band and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What kind of started pulling you into kind of the musics that you would like sort of as a teenager, right? Because like early on, you're just kind of absorbing the things that are around you, right? And then obviously you start creating your own tastes as you become a teen and becoming a person, right? So what was that sort of like for you, and how was it just kind of feeling that out?
Well, I listened to the radio a ton, but I had, and what was on the radio at the time I wasn't super interested in, and I had kind of a little bit of a chip on my shoulder and a like, if you guys like this, I'm not going to like it just for the sake of not liking it kind of vibe. So while I listened to the radio a lot, I would just, turn it to the very end of the dial and, assuming there was some secret, there. But kind of by chance there's a kind of a socialist radio station in LA called KPFK, and on Sundays, I think they still have it, they had this reggae and dub show, and I came across that, and at the time, I had as a little kid, I think I was maybe in 8th grade, so I wasn't a little kid, but I was still a kid, and I had never really heard anything like that before. And I was like, oh, this is new, like, what is it? I don't understand this. I have never heard anything like this before, so I want to try to get into that. And then when I went to high school, I was trying my very hardest to look and act weird, just out of insecurity or whatever rebelliousness that kids go through. So I started hanging out with kind of like the goth kids. I kind of became more goth as I got older, but I think because I looked like a weirdo, they sort of let me hang out with them. And then and a friend, I got to be friends with another kid who had never really played much but wanted to start another band. He had cooler older brothers and sisters who were into the early 4AD records. And then he started giving me some kind of proper goth records. Our goth adjacent stuff like Cocktail Twins and Miss Mortal Coil and Bauhaus and Bad Seeds and stuff like that. And
pretty good friend to have.
Pardon? Oh, no shit. Yeah, I mean, there's still some of my favorite bands ever.
Wherever that kid is, thanks.
He actually, he accidentally, when he was in his early 20s, he cut his hand off with a bandsaw on accident. So he doesn't really play guitar anymore, poor fucking guy. Yeah. But he opened the door for me. And we actually went to our first show together. The first show I ever went to was with him, and the first band I ever played a show with was with this guy. His name's Chris Silverman.
What were some of those early shows that you kind of got into that really were, you know, everyone I feel like has like bigger stuff that they like saw, you know, like, you know, some music had Kiss and it changed me, but then I got into, it was like the 80s and like I was in DC and I saw, you know, Black Flag, and then that really changed me and I could participate in that because it was like a youth culture thing, you know? Was there some of that for you?
And I think kind of like I was real, like not, and I'm still not particularly social. So like going to shows because it's like a lot of people around sort of situation is not something that I ever was really thrived. Like I didn't get energized by that. Like I wanted to see the music, but it was stressful for me to be around a ton of people. But there was this little tiny record store that had shows like 5 or 6 days a week or something. And it was, you know, it was at record stores, it was all ages, and I would just show up to that, and it was always $5. That's actually where the first place I played a show at, not at a party.
What record store was it?
It was called Bebop Records. It's been gone for a million years. It was very tiny, like the size of a bathroom, you know, like really, really, really low. Maybe a huge bathroom, but still, the tiny, tiny place. And I saw some pretty, I mean, you know, occasionally they kind of just let whoever the fuck play there. You know, so sometimes you go and it would be terrible. But, you know, I saw Dose there, which was Mike Watt and Kira Rossler. I saw there was this poet in LA called La Loca who did, I saw her a couple times. Jane's Addiction played there once, which was kind of crazy. I mean, like, they were even popular. I think they just played there to be fun, for fun. And just a lot of weird, some like kind of tiki-ish bands would play there, right? You know, like proto-grunge stuff.
That's kind of also, you know, you have to think about the time too, right? It's like pre-internet. You're just
absolutely.
You're fumbling around in the dark a little
opening the LA Weekly magazine and just seeing, you know, like, okay, this band's name is Dicted. I don't know if I really am into seeing a band called Dicted, but maybe I will be. I'll go check them out. You know, it'd feel like that. So, and I had no idea what it would be like.
Totally. And so you're just kind of like fumbling around trying to see that. And I'm always curious about these stories because it's always so unlikely where people will find the things, especially when they're young and they don't know any better, right? Like at the end of the radio dial, the one store that could have me, well, because I was young and it was only $5 to get in. And those are the things that start really forming.
Yeah,
right?
that was exactly it. You know, I mean, in the classic stuff of just going to record stores and, you know, buying these records because I had a cool cover and, you know, every 2 out of 10 of those was something totally transcendent and fantastic. Because they were used, you know, they were $2, so if it sucked, then, you know, whatever.
Then all of a sudden you see 10 Dictate records.
Right.
You're like, damn, I shouldn't have gone for it. You know, cool name, but I don't know.
That was a real band. I did not make that up.
Oh, okay, real band. So Dictate, I'm not trying to downplay your existence.
I really doubt they took themselves really seriously, so they're probably not too bummed out.
How can you with that name? That's horrible.
Yeah.
You know, like at least play it upright. You know, I don't know.
Yeah.
But so you have this whole experience. You're kind of fumbling around, starting to make music and
fumbling is a good way to put it. Yeah.
I feel like we all are, though. When you're that age, and unless you're a certain mad prodigy motherfucker, most people tend to, they're just kind of grasping at their influences, figuring things out. Yeah. But then you have this like kind of transformative time with your dad, it seems like, that really started giving you some mentorship. What was that sort of like to have a bit of mentorship at that time? Were you really like looking for it? Did it feel kind of weird for it to be your father doing it, or was it just really invited in?
It was all of those things. I mean, there were I mean, I have some sort of like lower brainstem kind of chromatic musical abilities, but I'm not really much of a technical player, like, at all. I never really have been. So I really needed somebody to, you know, to accomplish certain things. You have to have a certain amount of technique. So I needed somebody to kind of to show me a couple things, you know, because nobody really had so much. You know, it's kind of a lot of energy and a lot of intent and a lot of hope to do something kind of bubbling in there, but I definitely needed him to sort of say, okay, maybe hold your hand this way a little, it'll make your life 50 times easier, you know, like that kind of thing. But then, you know, again, it was my weird, estranged dad, and I don't know, it was an incredibly productive but incredibly confusing and fraught time also. It's especially because, you know, there was a couple years of a lot of growth emotionally and relationship-wise between he and I, and a lot of growth for me as a player and just becoming more focused in music. But then towards the end of that, I was seeing him begin to deteriorate again, you know, so it became very confusing. And, you know, I wasn't really sure how to handle it. And then my own life is, you know, as is the case with a lot of young people, you know, your life is kind of falling apart and you don't know what you're doing. So, I don't know. It was very confusing and strange. Yeah, I know I said confusing like 20 times, but that was probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, and very Jamie Stewart way, unexpected, comes out of left field, no chorus, and here we are at fatherhood mentorship, and not like some dude in a band, you know. This is like, or whatever, you know, like, oh yeah, we went on the road, and these guys kind of taught us a lot of shit. It's like you and your dad in your early 20s, kind of figuring this stuff out.
Yeah.
So, as you're kind of doing this and whatever, and you're, you know, you're kind of finding your playing and your voice and different things like that. And I mean voice in like a artistic sense of a voice. When I actually sat and I listened to 3 songs of every Xiu Xiu release I could today. Just to kind of put into the context. Because I've listened to different things along the map, right? And I was just trying to contextualize. And it's just so amazing to me that I don't feel like there's like a center to what you do, but I can't really pinpoint it in technique or in any sort of particular thing. It's like pornography, like you know it if you see it. Kind of. So I was just like, I don't really almost know how to approach the question, but I was like, what was it like starting to find your voice, and when did Xiu Xiu start becoming a thing that, you know, you knew that you wanted to kind of create?
Well, for one, thanks. We have a ton of records, so thanks for taking the time to listen to 3 songs out of each one. That would take a while.
Well, the thing is that I thought I was like pretty good, you know. And then I talked to our mutual friend Curran today, and I was like,
Tell him I said hi.
And I thought I had like a gap or 2, but I had like a gap or 3. And I was like, damn, I'm like shit, I'm like behind the wheel here a little bit. But it was really. You know, when I was just thinking about songwriting, about different things, it just felt like the journey has gone in many, many different directions over the years, where I'm like, it feels like a constant evolution. But at this point, like, what's the jumping off point for the start?
I guess it was, you know, I had just finished college. I didn't really want to go to college. And I had studied something that I thought that I should study to be a good person, but I was very distracted by wanting to do music. And I was kind of, you know, halfway having a straight job and kind of halfway playing in bands. And, you know, I was going to turn 25 and I was like, I can't waste my life like fucking around playing, you know. I have to knuckle down. I'm okay. If nothing happens, I'm gonna just put everything that I have ever. I'm gonna put 400 times more energy into making a record. I'm not gonna walk around town putting up flyers for 4 people to go see us play at Fibber McGee and Molly's or whatever fucking garbage place, you know, the other bands I was in would play. I'm not gonna waste my time doing that shit. Every spare second I have, I'm gonna try to work on this record, which would end up being the first Xiu Xiu record. And if nothing happens, that's fine. I know that I went about it with no distractions and no hesitation. And, you know, if that turns out, you know, thank God, great, I'll go with it. And if it doesn't, I'll go to grad school or whatever. You know, like I have to I had to really do one thing or the other. And I had a bandmate named Corey McCulloch, and I had played in the other bands with him, and he was feeling the same way. I mean, he had a straight, it was all bands with other people who had straight jobs, and they loved to play, and they were all incredibly good musicians, but it wasn't. None of them, other than Corey, were like, okay, fuck it, this is it, right? Like, I'm gonna put everything I have into this and see what happens. So for about a year, we lived in the same garbage house, so for about a year, that's all we did when we weren't at work was work on this record. And we sat down, we actually wrote down, okay, we like these 5 elements of music. We're gonna do something that really focuses on these things. And then I got to be really good friends with Greg Saunier from Tear Up, and still really good friends. He's produced a bunch of our records, and another mentor for me, hands down, as well. He gave our record to Slim at Kill Rock Stars, and we had sent it to every other, at the time there was 20 million other more indie labels than there are now. We sent it to everybody, and nobody was into it. And we're like, okay, well, that's kind of it. And Greg had given the tip to Slim, and didn't hear anything. And we're like, oh, well, that's a bummer. That seemed like our closest connection and our best shot. But apparently Slim had just like left the tape in a cab or something like that. He said, no, I really want to hear it. I really want to hear it. Send me another one. And I'm glad he did.
Just like Airheads.
Yeah.
Just like Airheads.
We had written 2 other songs, which I think were kind of really, that ended up on the record, that I think really tied it together. And I'm kind of glad we had those other couple of months to do it. And we gave him the tape, and he, very fortunately for us, just decided to put it out. And that ended up being the first issue.
Was that record A Promise or Nice?
Oh, a Nice Play.
Nice Play, yeah. Okay, so this is the first one, and that was on Kill Rock Stars. That
was on 5RC, which was like a side label of Kill Rock Stars.
Yeah, like there was this little Russian nesting dolls thing that I'm like.
Yeah, for a little bit, and then I think we did 4 or 5 records on 5RC, and then we did 1 record on Kill Rock Stars, and then Slim left the label, and then we started. Then we were on Polygon, where we are now. But Slim's back at Kill Rock Stars actually now, which is great. And Portia, who ran it otherwise, was doing fantastic also, but I think we just wanted to try something different in between. She did a really great job also.
Sure. So, you've been working on this thing, and, I listened, for me, my Xiu Xiu listening was kind of, sort of, up to like Live Foray, I was pretty in, and I was like, personally, as a younger person, discovering like electronic music and other things, and breaking out of my hardcore, Long Island hardcore shell, like, what's going on here, guys? What else do we got out in the world? How you doing? That's cool. The Locust, that sounds fun. What's happening, So I was really trying to look at other things, West Coast hardcore, Gravity hardcore started pulling me in, other sort of like things, and I came across your music, and I was just like, wow, I was so blown away by the fact that you had so many different voices in one project, meaning not only how you sang, but just the way that the songs came up. When you talk about the radio, I was thinking about the early records, especially A Promise. It feels like I'm kind of going around the dial, and then I settle up on this thing, and I'm like, wow, that's great. And then like the next song, I might be tuning into a different frequency, but it's still you. How do you kind of manage all of those different disparate sort of parts? Is it kind of something that just free flows out, or is it like, hey, I want to try and hit these certain particular touchstones?
At first, when we started, and I kind of mentioned it a little, like that Corey and I sat down and we literally wrote down like, okay, we're doing these 5 things, and we wanted, because the bands we had played in before were even more all over the place. We just are just music dorks and really like listening to a ton of records, and we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know that focus was a good idea. The focus like gives the listener something to understand and to get into. But as music dorks, we're like, we don't want to focus. We love everything. So at first, probably, and this probably applied maybe to those first 4 records. We're like, okay, we want to do kind of like Detroit sort of gay techno dance music kind of stuff, house music. But the very kind of nascent, very simple dance floor music, noise music, British post-punk, different Asian percussion musics, and how many is that?
That's four.
And it's like, and then sort of like modern classical music.
Uh-huh.
And sort of
That's
see,
a big fifth.
okay.
That's a major fifth. That's...
And Corey got me into that. I didn't know anything about that world before him. And now
it's kind of amazing considering your voice, like your actual singing voice now, or your actual singing. Because sometimes to me, it comes off feeling with the vibrato and some aspects of it really feels like, it could be touching that, but you kind of didn't come at that kind of came to you a little bit.
Oh, I don't know.
Or is it?
I have a very difficult relationship with my singing voice.
I hear you.
Yes, but I probably most people do. So anyway, at first, I mean, those are still 5 fairly disparate points to jump into music on. And since then, I mean, we've just had kind of continued to add, I guess, things that we love on top of it, or broaden out a little bit from those sort of initial 5 pillars or whatever. But it essentially just comes from being a fan of music and being touched by a lot of different kinds of music and getting a lot out of listening to things. And and a lot of that comes from when I was a kid, like I said, my dad wasn't around a lot, but he did give me records occasionally. And but he would give me like the best records that there ever were, like a Prince record or a Marvin Gaye record or a Talking Heads record. So from a young age, I got a sense of that there's a very big difference between Prince and Motley Crue. Like the depth is there's a lot more going on. It's way more interesting, politically and socially and musically and aesthetically. I could hear that and go, okay, there's that, and I could listen to that 3 times and go, okay, I kind of got the fucking idea. I don't need to hear this again, but I still listen to, probably all those records I listened to as a kid are still fantastic because they were so wonderful. And I think because of that at a pretty young age, it just got me into, I mean, I'm not a big record collector, but I'm a diverse music listener. I'll probably get maybe one record a month or something like that, but I'll listen to it. Just like the only thing I'll listen to all month. And I've been like that since I was a kid. Yeah, I like to really, really, but because of that, I think I really, if I know I want to listen to it again and again and again, I usually look for something that has a lot of layers. And I think because I enjoy a lot of music that has a lot of layers and comes from a lot of directions, I think naturally that's sort of, shape what we're tried to do as a band.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
No, I think that honestly,
okay.
I'm really unpacking some shit right now.
Okay.
I feel like I'm here. I'm like, okay, keep going. No, it really kind of does in a way, because I love this sort of 5-point program that you put together. Like there was an intention there, and I mean it's a good jumping off point, but you have to be willing to embrace that intention. Like I feel like maybe you're used to it because you're you and you do that shit. But like if I told like people that I played music with when I was 24, I'm like, okay, guys, here we go. Detroit techno, British punk, modern classical. Like, Jamie, come on. Like, I mean, it's disparate, but it's also, you have to have a certain bravery to try and climb that mountain and create something.
I think it wasn't like we were doing it. We're like, oh yeah, we're motherfuckers. We'll do anything. We were just dorks. I mean, we just.
That's why it's good, though.
Okay.
That's why it's good. Because if not, it would blow. If somebody like really like cared like super hard in a way, but there has to be that fine line between gusto and like wanting to go for it, but a little bit of naivete. I think it was. I mean, we picked stuff that we thought was cool. Sorry, my arm is getting tired.
geez Louise. Fucking,
Oh,
all
that's
right.
happening.
The arm is back. It's all arm again. I mean, we weren't entirely naive insofar as that, you know, we knew Cecil Taylor was cool, and we knew Morton Feldman was cool, and we, you know, we knew that Joy Division was cool. But I think we didn't realize that if we smushed those things together, that that was, you know, a sort of an insane prospect.
Yeah, and
it seemed, you know, because it's just what we were into.
But I think that that's what makes, you know, bands and groups that I really like, that feel like they're kind of out in their own geography, like creating their own world. That's what I kind of love about what you do.
I think I like that about bands too. I know what as a music fan, that really always hits me too when a band is very clearly, you know, not thinking about the outside world all that much.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just like, dude, I would never have thought, like a lot of people, but you found, but you know, the common thread to pull through those things to create what you created over time and create those explorations, at least from the jumping off point. And obviously it's evolved quite a bit over time and all that. The other, you know, besides kind of like the oral layer of the band and bringing those 5-point program to destroy America. The other thing I think that is also really key and central to your work is obviously the lyrics and everything that you kind of bring there, from the weight of the storytelling, the emotional weight, to also how you deliver them with your you know, your tumultuous relationship with your own singing voice. Could you talk to me a little bit about just inhabiting some of that lyrical identity and kind of, you know, becoming that writer? Because I feel like in creating this world, you're obviously the narrator of it in a way. And a lot of people have fallen in love with that aspect of your music making, which is, you know, the broad and often dark, witty subject matter and the way they kind of collide at different times.
Oh, that's very nice of you to say. Thank you. It largely just came from another dork trajectory of just reading a lot, and at the time that the band started, also I was also reading a lot of, I don't know what drew me to this, but for a couple of years, read everything I could get my hands on about the history of different genocides that had happened in the 20th century. And I think because I was so enmeshed in that all of the time, it's like my entire sort of narrative line of thinking was that when the band started. And in addition to just having had a not a great childhood, and you know, my parents both dealt with a ton of abuse also, and I went to social work for school, so thinking about, you know, the difficulties of the human existence alive, and attempting and hoping to be politically aware to some degree, and also just being definitely an oversensitive and excessively emotional person to an irritating degree. I'm irritated myself, you know, but I can't imagine what it's like to hang out.
I'm mad at you too. I'm mad at you.
It was not. There was a conscious decision to write about factual events or actual events when we started, and that has evolved a little bit in the last few years to get to sort of more dream states or more sort of subconsciously derived lyrics, but certainly exclusively for the first 2/3 of the life of the band, probably more, it was only writing about real and actual events, and a lot of that was needing and wanting to figure out what the fuck had happened to my family when I was growing up, and then also what the fuck had happened to a lot of people in the developing world over the 20th century, and also just in my neighborhood. And in, you know, the band also, you know, began at the beginning of the Bush administration, and, you know, starting to completely pointless, you know, corporate-based wars, which are still going on. So it was just an attempt to organize all of that excess of emotion and excess of negativity. And I think just because of liking to read a lot, and having read a lot, organizing them lyrically seemed like a natural thing to do.
I think that there's always been this sort of great thing of like the biographical and the sociological in your work kind of like playing off of one another, and double entendre and words, and just the way you kind of like bring those things together. And it seems to me like it, because you're reading all that stuff, things are happening to you, you're unpacking these things, they kind of crash into your mind and then kind of create this sort of lyrical palette that is really like pretty, you know, singular to you, honestly, when I listen to it. And you also have this beautiful way of creating space in your songs. I think as things have gone on in like Live For It and like those records especially, there's a lot of space and quiet where sometimes there'd be a little bit more noise and stuff like that, and like really letting the listener feel an intimacy with some of those words, to me, was really cool.
That's just ripping off Morton Feldman pretty much.
There you go. Okay, yeah. Cool. Mark, cheers to you.
Yeah. Mort.
Oh, Mort, sorry. My bad. In a way, though, that's beautiful to me, though, because then it almost feels like when you have that quiet, though, you can, the lyric has to really deliver, or else, you know, you don't have anything else to hide behind.
Oh, thanks. I mean, as a fan of music too, I mean, it's bad lyrics will just ruin a song for me. So, you know, I mean, obviously I've written a ton of bad lyrics, not intentionally, but I always put everything I can into trying to have something be as meaningful as it can be, you know, and not overused. Something that also really kills me is there'll be a great line in a song, and then the person will say that great line like 30 times in a row. They're like, "Ah, I've got a good one. I'm going to use it over and over and over and over and over again." So I think you know, in trying to avoid doing that, and then also just because of my own sort of self-pressure to try to not to say as few stupid things as possible, and it just has led to putting maybe an excess of care into trying to write lyrics, and, you know, hopefully that amount of work, you know, translates into something that can hold up. And I used to play with this insane drummer, and I don't mean insane like he was a shredding drummer, like he was a crazy person, named Brady Fischler. He was a motherfucker, incredibly good, but nuts.
Yeah,
and
no posers, like,
yeah.
Not truly insane.
He was actually crazy, yeah.
Yeah.
But we were sitting on he played in the first band I played in with Corey, which a couple bands before Xiu Xiu, and I had been reading about the famine that took place during the Cultural Revolution in China, and there were people having to eat their own children. Like, basically, if a child died, they had to cook it and feed that dead child to their other children in order to keep the family alive. And I had read about that, and I was like, "God, can I write about this?" And Brady looks at me, he's like, "What else are you going to write about? Sitting on the couch?" So, I was like, oh yeah, thanks, man.
That's great. I love that.
It was good advice. It was good advice. I wish he was a little more studied, because he had good advice and I think he's still playing with a superb drummer. And then also, it's, you know, you can't talk about him anymore for obvious and very good reasons. But early on, Smith's and Morrissey lyrics, prior to him becoming an unfortunate being, were incredibly important to me insofar as putting forth what seemed like genuine emotionality, but also with a sense of humor. I mean, not in an unserious way. Like he can be very, very, very funny, but still very, very, very serious. And it kind of opened up for me putting things that were funny in lyrics, but they weren't I mean, they are a joke, but they're not there in a jokey way. Does that distinction make sense?
Yeah, totally. Like in a way that I mean, British people have a beautiful way of being charming and rather like ha ha ha, but at the same time they're telling you something fucking for real. Like
yeah,
and that's amazing. Like I feel like that's something that is cultural. That's cultural to them. Like we don't have that.
Not really. Yeah,
you
not in that same way
like,
at all.
fuck you, motherfucker. You know, you're like, oh, all right, cool. Like that's great. You know, like you watch one football broadcast, one good Premier League, and they'll say they'll say stuff like that feels totally like fine, but at the same time, it's like really brutal. It'd be like, he just should have done better there. It wasn't good enough, you know. He should have just done better there. Like he needs to show his quality. He needs to show his quality. Like to me, that's deep.
That's an incredibly good line.
Yeah, dude. Okay, Jamie, show your quality is gonna be my song. Don't take it, but no.
It's yours. I look forward to hearing it.
In that way, it comes off in this like it just rolls over you, but at the same time you're like, damn, that cut like 3,000 knives deep, and it was rather charming and funny, but in reality you're like, fair play, like that was pretty amazing. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. And that's kind of a disarming way of getting a point across too, right? Like you have this heavy subject matter, but you could kind of use that as a Trojan horse in. Do you feel like that's the device that you've used before?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it just, you know, just from being appreciating that approach to presenting difficult subjects. And I think just also, I mean, when I'm under stress and something bad is happening, I mean, I find myself just making jokes anyway, just because I'm freaking out. It's frequently extraordinarily inappropriate. I shouldn't do it, but I think it's just a way of dealing with, with difficulties. So yeah, both of those things for sure. My bandmate Angela religiously reads The Economist, and most of the writers are British. And just last night she was reading about huge rates of sexually transmitted disease or STI infection. It's going up in England during COVID, but she's like laughing her ass off because just the way that they're presenting it in The Economist. It's not a great thing for people to get more STIs during a plague, but it's The Economist, so they're putting it across in a pretty funny way, or a pretty cutting way.
Yeah, and they'll put their vibe on it. They'll make it prim and proper, but you're like, the fact still remains. Actually, speaking of Angela, this is something that I did want to talk about a little bit. And, we were talking a bit before about the earliest period of the group. And obviously you've been the centrifugal force kind of Xiu Xiu, But people have come and gone, and then it was kind of like you, and then Angela shows up. Could you tell me a little bit about, just collaboration, playing with other people, and how you found yourself in this kind of sort of steadier situation? I think it seems like post 2009, 2010, right?
Yeah. She joined in like full on in 2010, and like keeping the recording situation has always been pretty steady. Like Greg has been there. Greg Sonia from Deriff has been there since 2006. Angela since 2010. Ches Smith has been playing on stuff since 2002, on and off. I've worked with John Congleton pretty regularly since 2012. I work with Corey McCulloch for the first, for the first 4 records for sure. So there have been chunks of time where there have been a lot of the same people. Carolee McElroy did stuff for about 6 years. Which is longer than a lot of bands last. So some people kind of give a shit for having people come and go, but and I wish that it was the same people all the time, because I look at friends bands like Deriff, and they've had the same lineup for 10 or 12 years, and they sound fucking ridiculous live. because they play together all the time. It's always the same people. But yeah, I know it's been hard keeping a live thing together. I'll get back to Angela in a sec, because it's a and her involvement in the band now has changed in a kind of curious way.
Sure.
I think some of it has been just that. I mean, we've been around for a while, but it's not like we're super famous. So half of our shows are really tiny and shitty, and and half of them are in nice places. But spending half your time on tour in a shitty place is still 50% of shittiness, and just that makes a lot of people difficult to be around, or they don't want to deal with it, or and we do okay financially, but not well enough that I can pay people who need to be as good as I need them to be, because the music's hard to play, as much as I'd like to. There's a finite amount of money to dole out. So it takes someone who's really dedicated and is willing to put up with a lot of BS and make us slightly less money just because they're into it. So it's been hard to keep people together. And I've made some bad choices with people who I thought were good, and it turns out they were shitty people, and whatever. I'm learning. So live, it's been very hard. It's been very hard to keep things together. Over the years, there hasn't been a live lineup that's lasted more than a couple of years, which is I don't love that aspect of things. But with Angela, from a recording perspective, she hasn't really actually been able to tour all that much. She toured for all of 2010, and then when we did the Twin Peaks record, she was able to do all those shows. So her live involvement, unfortunately, although she's a delight to play with, because she holds back nothing. And occasionally we'll get to do something here and there. So there hasn't been that much of that, but her main thing for sort of the arc of the band has been producing the records and playing on them. And in the past few years making the videos also, which I think she's spectacular at. But she has a very, very serious, time-consuming day job. So basically the setup is I'll sit in our studio, work on stuff all day, and then she'll come in afterwards and go, okay, this works, this doesn't work. Take this, change this, do that. So I'll sort of be like, I sort of have my, the myopic approach to it, and she'll come back and see the whole thing and say, okay, there's 5 synth parts here. None of these, you can't tell what's going on. So I'm going to pick this one. And invariably she picks the one that, puts the idea of the song across in
That's
the best
pretty
way.
amazing.
Yeah, it's a good setup.
It's kind of like Air. I remember seeing a documentary on Air, and they're rarely kind of in the same room, those two guys, and they kind of work in shifts.
It's not dissimilar. Yeah, it's kind of like that.
And then sort of at the end when they're kind of mixing and arranging a little bit more, they kind of come together, but they're like, I kind of give him some space, he gives me some space, you kind of come in at different times, sometimes you overlap, but that's very interesting that that's sort of a part. When you talk about, playing live, obviously, like you said, it is difficult to pull off music that is as expansive as yours is, from so many different sort of points and of kind of taking off, right? The 5-point program is not, something kind of chill to play. So, in your experience, like you said, financially, other things like getting some big band together or something that is really like a machine like that. What were some ways that you've been able to kind of circumvent that in a way? Do you think that you've been satisfied or not? Have there been different approaches that you've been like, hey, I like this one more than another one? What was the kind of trial?
It was never really like an approach or other that worked. I mean, there were just certain times where a couple good people could do it, for a couple years, and then they had other interests, or we didn't get along, or some shit,
Well, I'm mad at them.
It's okay. There's a couple people I miss playing with, and a lot of people I'm super glad I'll never see again. So it's fine. I don't feel married to any particular approach. I think it's changed always because certain players had the capacity to do certain things. So the idea was to work the arrangements around what their strengths were, what their abilities were. which I always enjoyed doing. Like I never had a problem with the live things not sounding like the record. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they're totally different because you know certain players have the capacity to do certain things and other ones don't. So you know, have people do what they're great at rather than try to force them to do something that's a struggle for them and it's no fun and it doesn't sound good. And I think some people have mentioned that they enjoy going to Xiu Xiu shows because over the years because it tends to always be pretty different live. But that was never by design. It was never on purpose. It was just that there have been so many different lineups that things just needed to you just needed to deal with the cards that were dealt for that particular period of time.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, I actually feel kind of like the latter way. Like it's kind of exciting to know that you go into a Xiu Xiu show, and you're kind of rather familiar with the material, but the execution is not going to be the same all the time. But like the execution will be of a quality that's cool, but it like could be all acoustic at a time. There could be electronics involved or not or whatever. But like I trust you as an artist to give that to me however you kind of intended it to be. So it's
I wish there was more intent behind it. It's just sort of more desperate necessity, like, oh God, we have like 80 shows coming up. How the fuck are we gonna do this?
Gotcha. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense too. And I think that it's important for our audience to hear. We talk a lot about process on the show and all the other things that go into being an artist in a band or a group or whatever have you. And at a certain point, ideas, different things, they take money to pull off or other things of that nature. And you have to kind of figure out how you're going to present yourself and do certain things of that nature, whether it be playing and you're like, wow, I wrote something that has a string section in it. Well, guess what? Like, I can't do that live every night. However, you're going to do that. And over your career, you've had a lot of different records with a lot of different sort of sonic aspects to it that can't be the easiest thing to navigate. And sometimes it's the mother of invention, right? Some people might be like, man,
oh yeah, it could, like, it's another opportunity to be creative. And it's, I mean, I know that I was talking about that I get stressed out about it and I wish that it was not like that, but it is like that. So it might as well be looked at as a chance to try something new and learn something. When I'm in a decent headspace, I can look at it like that. When I'm not, I'm just freaking out. So.
Cool. Yeah, that's pretty much it, huh? As far as the visual aspect of the band, it's definitely kind of ebbed and flowed and changed over time. I feel like sometimes it's been very like you forward, or like, dear God, I hate myself. Like you're on the cover of the record and like, it's very Jamie forward. There are other times where it's like, just like different arcs of kind of how the early A Promise, it has kind of like that the dude on the bed and like it's he's kind of covered up a little bit there. I think he's nude. There's just kind of like these different moments as far as the artwork is concerned. And how do you kind of like pick people to collaborate with for artwork? Do you make some stuff? How did the visual aspect of Xiu Xiu, how does that come together for you?
There was kind of two halves to it, essentially. Is that your house or my house?
Hmm?
Oh, sorry, I thought I heard something funny. Pardon me. Up until in 2012, I had a record called Always, and kind of between 2002 with Night Play up until Always, not entirely, but mostly did stuff with my brother Joe Stewart, who's a designer, and just he may have an idea and ask for something, or I might have some kind of nascent idea, and say maybe try something like this. But most of the time, he would just say, this is what this is going to be. And he's a very good designer, so it's always a pleasure for me to just accept what someone's answer is when they present it to you if they're good at it. I don't feel like I have to be the boss of things at all. I really love working with people who are good and say, please be yourself, please do your thing, add your heart to this, and having the confidence because they have tremendous amount of ability and integrity and certainty about what they're doing, and I feel very confident that it's going to be great, and it'll be a surprise, and it'll be different than something I would do, so it gives the project that much more depth, hopefully. But around that time, it's actually on the last record, always 2012, there's a tattoo on the cover, and it's actually my brother's leg. He actually had the cover just like tattooed on his thigh. So speaking of intent and dedication, he's
and
on
putting
it.
heart into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
But at that point, it had been 10 years. And are you going? You want to say hi? This is my family, Angela. We share a house.
Oh, Angela, what's up? Okay, the night shift is in.
The night shift is in.
Yeah, I like that. The night shift is in. The tracksuit. We're ready to make a new techno record.
She is going to the gym. There's a gym in LA that is outside. So
sick.
She's wearing a tracksuit because she's actually working out for real.
That's tight, though.
Not because it's the 90s and she's working at the factory.
Aesthetics, working man's catwalk at the football game, whatever you want to do. I'm good with it, Angela. You're a hero.
You've been called a hero for your workout outfit.
Sick. I love that. I'm kind of avoiding touching on any one particular record too much because there's frankly a ton of them. But I do want to kind of talk about where we've ended up a little bit, right? Because we've gone through a lot of kind of changes and things like that. I feel like I did a pretty decently hard kettlebell workout to your last record, myself today, which is actually awesome. Girl with Basket of Fruit. And this is actually, I kind of dove back in to your music because I heard it was like, hey, I feel like he's kind of returning to form. It's a little bit of like noise sort of stuff. And then he did some stuff with Mersville lately. And I'm like, I got to check out where Xiu Xiu is sort of at. And I feel like the record is sort of you at your most sort of psychedelic in a way. And I really enjoy that record. And I just was just like, there's a little bit more, I feel like, industrial bits to it. And, pitch shifting of vocals, it seems like other things of that nature. Could you just sort of talk about Xiu Xiu at its present moment and how you sort of feel about that? And also, it looks like we have another record sort of on the way, right? So
yeah, and next month. Comes out next month. Yeah.
Next month. So we have new Xiu Xiu to explore more of the world you've built for us. But talk to me a little bit about where we've sort of netted out on this last one, because I feel like it's super cool. It's refreshing to me in a different way.
It's funny to say where Xiu Xiu is at right now, because we have that record, Grow with Basket of Fruit. We have this thing that's coming out in March called Oh No, but I'm working on a whole other thing right now. So where Xiu Xiu is at this moment is real different than Grow with Basket of Fruit and real different than Oh No. But, so Grow with Basket of Fruit, I think psychedelic is a good way to put it.
I won.
You did. Not the entire record, but most of the record is about what, like lyrically, probably half, maybe a little more than half of the record is about what the perspective of someone who may be literally or figuratively possessed by a devil or a demon, and what that experience is like for them internally. What they're seeing and what they're feeling. Which, I mean, psychedelia is probably the right approach to consider a topic like that. And at the same time that I was thinking a lot about that subject, was also getting deeply interested in Haitian drumming and its sort of proto-Haitian drumming, which would be Yoruba drumming. And had a friend who I mentioned before, Ches Smith, who's become a scholar of that music and plays with a bunch of legit master Haitian musicians, and he was able to get them together to play on this record, which I am eternally grateful. It was mind-boggling to be in that session. It doesn't even make sense how good they were. And then, also at the time, just getting to be, in a productive, not shitty way, interested in literal psychedelics, which is not something that I really got into as a kid at all. so just exploring the other side of consciousness, and being possessed by a devil, literally or figuratively, is about as far into the other side of consciousness as you could still be and still have some sort of considered consciousness. And then at the same time, again, allied to psychedelia, there was an attempt to really not think about it that much, to put those elements into play, have the songs be very much timbrally based and sound based, not really harmonically based hardly at all, and then just see what was going to happen. That was probably the least amount of thinking that went into it, and probably the most amount of literally rolling the dice or flipping coins on things. There might be like 6 particular junctures that could occur at a point in a song, and literally rolling the dice and say, okay, it's going to be number 4, and see what happens. Or I got a flipping coin for making decisions. It's a Sacagawea dollar. It's on my computer desk where we do all the mixing or did recording. So a lot of just letting things go, which is what psychedelia is largely about. And and that record was also a lot about political violence and the cross section of political violence 100 years ago, and as it is now, which unfortunately is not super different.
I love the.
I don't know if I answered that at all. Sorry.
No,
I got all over the place.
Dude, if you make a psychedelic record, I'm expecting psychedelic answers. I'm totally fine with it. And also, I love the Sacagawea dollar, though. It's almost like a John Cage, aleatory music.
Oh yeah, it's exactly that kind of thing. I mean, some of it came from the kind of traditions of early modern classical chant music. And some of it was also just not wanting to spend time wringing my hands and just let the universe decide. Angela's not always available to say it should be this. And sometimes I'll sit and I'll listen to the same fucking thing that goes. One thing goes beep, and one thing goes beep. I'm like, oh God, which one is better? Which one is better? Oh God, it's been like 50 fucking minutes, and I'm like, oh, just flip a coin. It doesn't. A beep will occur. Let the universe decide which beep it's going to be.
And that's really cool too, to kind of give yourself to it. And I think that the result, to me at least, this listener was really pleased with kind of how it went. And like, again, there's so many twists and turns to Xiu Xiu, the sound. It keeps us guessing. It keeps the world fresh. It's like the seasons here. You don't.
You're delightful.
Here in New York, we have them. In LA, you don't. But here we do. And I love them. I love them for everything that they bring. I love the snow for what it brings. I love the hardness of the winter and the rebirth of the spring. Like, I enjoy all these things. I'm definitely a natural East Coaster in my life. And like, I feel like when I get Xiu Xiu, I get a whole person. I feel like someone who's unrestrained in a way, who's willing to give you all the different sides. And I think that for me, that's really cool. And as listeners,
thanks.
I think
that's really nice of you to say. Thank you very much.
And that's, I think, a hard thing to sort of qualify or capture. That's why for this talk, I didn't really want to talk about like X record and what you did or something. I wanted to talk about more this sort of overarching stuff. But before I let you go, and our time is almost up here, I do want to sort of just ask you a little bit about what's coming, because, like you just said, there's always the public timeline of the project and the and whatever, and there's what's in your head and where you're at the moment. So tell me about what's about to happen with the new record, Oh No, and what do we have to look forward to?
So Oh No comes out on March 26th, and it's all duets, which we had not done. We've done a couple duets, but each track is a duet with a different person. And it came out of having had a particularly heinous year socially, and it kind of caused my brain to explode, like literal nervous breakdown, and hating people more than ever. But my friend's response and people into Xiu Xiu's response to my brain exploding was to be unbelievably sweet and nice and thoughtful, and it kind of pulled me out of this incredibly deep pit of super hate that I was in. And as a way to try to acknowledge that kindness and just to kind of say thank you to the general idea of humanity as an idea, doing as things as duets as a concept seemed like for lack of a better word, kind of a sweet way to try to appreciate how generous and nice people were. The songs on the record are not about that idea at all. But the idea of doing things as duets is kind of trying to say thank you to people for reminding me that most people are actually great, not that most people are actually piles of shit.
That's a good thing to remind yourself, I think. You know?
It was. I really needed. I was in a pretty bad way. I really needed it. I wrote a book that comes out. That'll come out around in the fall. It's sort of like a memoir of sexual misadventure. It's mostly funny. It's kind of very depressing and mostly funny. It's just sort of about doing stupid things and being bad. And then just, no one's on tour right now, so I have a lot of extra time to start working on the next thing. So cool. Just like, trying to figure out what the next record will be right now.
Totally.
What are you working on?
Yeah, to me, that's a beautiful thing. And we're lucky to have you just here with us to chat a bit. And we're looking forward to the duets. And thanks a lot for your time.
Oh, Jamie. Thanks. What are you working on right now?
Me? Oh,
yeah.
Man. Let's see. I have, as David from Saint Vitus has got tons of, we got 2 amazing merch collaborations that are
cool.
Almost done. Yeah. One with Tamara Santibanez, an amazing tattoo artist. They are wonderful, from New York. And also one with Anthony Lucero, who is the lead singer of Metal Titans, Cult Leader, one of my favorite bands going.
Right on.
Super tight, and it's cool to be working with these independent artists and just kind of still connecting, right? Like what we're doing right now, and also connecting on making art, right? Whether it's not music, but visually and doing other things. So keeps my mind still in the right place, I feel like. And then musically, I got Confines has a new EP coming out on Synthesized in the spring, which I'm excited about. And, just doing my thing, man, as best as I can. And, trying to connect still to the life I know I sort of have, but it's sort of dormant, So that's what this also really provides too. So I'm really happy that we're able to do it and to, talk to people that I've never met like yourself or people that I have.
Nice to meet you.
So it's wonderful. Thank you so much, Jamie. I'll talk
You were
to you
great.
soon.
You were such a sweetie. I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it too, man. Thank you. See you guys.
Bye.
Ciao.